Good morning. Thanks for being here on a 3-day weekend. Apparently, you don't own a cabin in McCall either. Thank you. No, seriously, thank you for hanging out with us today. It's going to be a good day. We are wrapping up a series that has, I feel, been Spirit-led, and just one of those sermon prep meetings that we were prepping for a sermon, and it ended up being 3 sermons because we felt like God was in the middle of it, and it was for all of us. So we've been talking about the connected triangle, and as you saw in that video, we consider there to be really 3 pieces to this triangle. And at the top, we should probably start with God, but for our illustrations, it works better if we put ourselves at the top. So this is you. And over here we have God, and over here we have your community. We like to use the word micro-community meaning people who truly know you, know who you are, know your struggles, your fears. They know the names of your kids. They know if something bad is happening in your life. They know if something great is happening in your life. They celebrate with you when good things happen. They mourn with you when bad things happen. These are your micro-community. You're lucky to have 3 of these, 4 of these. If you have more than that, consider yourself spoiled rotten, because that's really odd. I have 2 that I would consider in my journey that really know me. We have history, and nothing, this is an important part of my micro community, nothing they could say to me would change how I feel about them, right? Nothing they would bring to the table would make me go, whoa, I can't be your friend anymore. We have that trust in that micro community. And so this is the triangle that we've been talking about for a few weeks. And I want to take maybe just a little more time than normal to kind of recap the last 2 weeks, and then we're going to move into more of a devotional for today. So week 1, for those of you who are here, we kind of split this triangle right down the middle. And we talked about the difference between extroverts and introverts. And we said extroverts are over here, and they're great with connecting to community. This bridge is so strong because you extroverts, man, you just can't wait to get to the party. You can't wait to work the line. This just brings you joy. But sometimes you extroverts struggle with this bridge connecting to God. Time alone to you is excruciating. There's nobody to talk with and to share your ideas with, and you feel alone. You struggle to connect with God. Introverts, of course, are going to be the opposite. You love your time alone in the car, time alone at home. I made the joke the first week. Introverts love their time alone in the bedroom when their extroverted spouse is having a party downstairs, right? You enjoy that time alone, but you lack this community. This for you is really tough. I mean, you get done at a wedding or at a party or a get-together, and you are just emotionally wiped, and you go home and you have to take a nap before you can do anything else because you had to be around people for a while. Now, this is what I find really intriguing about this. God has asked us to have strong relationships in both areas. This is something I didn't share week 1, but yesterday I did 2.5 weddings. I presided over 2, and I attended a 3rd, and so I was in a suit all day long. It was awesome. That's sarcasm. So I'm wearing my hoodie today to make up for my day in my suit yesterday. Anyway, and there's a verse that a lot of weddings talk about when at the very beginning Adam is in the garden with God, and God says, "It is not good for what? For man to be alone." Now, I've heard that. I've preached that. What I never got until this week is I was, again, just the Lord's really moving in my heart on how important community is. And we spend all our time talking about God and not enough time talking about the importance of community. And I'm thinking about that, and I begin to realize Adam wasn't alone. God was with him. God is in the garden. But before woman is made, before the fall of man, we actually have dialogue that God is talking to Adam. And later on after the fall, we see that they're in the garden together, walking and talking. So you get the idea, however this happened, whatever you want to believe, if that's symbolic or whatever. But we see something here. I believe it happened. There's something here where God and man, before the fall, were well connected. God says to Adam, hey man, I'm setting up some stuff here in the garden for you, and don't eat of this tree, but this is okay. And this is in chapter 2, verse 15 of Genesis. He's explaining, hey, here's the garden, and here's kind of the rules, and here's how we're going to live. And so at the very beginning, we see that Adam had community. He was not alone. And still, even though he's connected to God Almighty, God says, it's not good for you to be by yourself. Now, again, until this week, this just didn't hit me. But to me, this is great evidence of this connected triangle. That it's not just about this bridge connected to God, but He has purposely set us up here to be community. He wants us to find micro-community. He wants us to live together. There's another verse I did talk about week 1. I think it bears repeating. It's Jesus right before the arrest to be crucified. And he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, and he takes his disciples with him. And there's 12 of them, and he stops them. And then he gets his kind of inner circle, Peter, James, and John, and he takes them a little further. And there's this great quote where he says, will you just come keep watch with me? And this idea that Jesus, who is, let's agree, has the absolute strongest bridge to God than any of us, maybe all of us put together, the way he talked about God, the way he understood God, the way that he was God, according to John 1:1. Like we see this bridge is incredibly strong, and still in this time of trial and need, Jesus says to his three guys in his micro community, please will you just come sit with me? Will you just come watch with me? And I don't think this was a sign of weakness or sinfulness, or that Jesus somehow was having a meltdown. This was righteous and pure and holy, because everything he did was righteous and pure and holy. And he desired for this bridge to be strong in his times of struggle. And so Peter, James, and John, they go with him and wait and watch and pray. So we are designed not just to have a strong relationship with God, but God designed us from the very beginning to have a strong relationship with community. Again, as I've been studying this, and even a friend of mine called this week, he lives in Wyoming, he's part of a micro community, and he's about to do a talk on this, and we started brainstorming. I said, man, I'm right in the middle of this, and God's been moving in my journey too, and so let's talk about it. And we begin to break out what it means. And one of the things that came up, again, in my heart, is we are being taught through our music and sometimes through my preaching, which is wrong, that God is enough. Follow me. If God is enough, why in the garden did he say man should not live alone? I'm going to give him more. If God is everything, then why does he command us to live in community? Why over and over again does he say, man, you should not be alone. If there's two, you can protect each other. If there's two, you can keep warm. Why did Jesus in the New Testament take his 70 or 72 disciples, depending on which translation you read? Why did he take those 70 disciples and send them out in pairs? Right? Couldn't they have gotten a lot more done if they went 70 different directions? Instead, he put them in pairs and he sent them in 35 different directions. Because this is what God desires, is for us to have a strong bridge to community and a strong bridge to him. And this is so much more purposeful than what we can imagine. We tend to look at this at least I tend to look at this almost like, oh, God's doing this because he wants us to be happy, or he wants it, we get all these kind of selfish entertainment type concepts on why friendships, especially for those of us who are extroverts, we just kind of live on this and it's exciting for us. But I believe it's so much deeper than that. It's prayer for each other. It's accountability for each other. And so last week, for those that were here, we began to break down this triangle. And what we said is, if we take away this bridge, and you are connected to a strong community, and this strong community is connected to God, which is very important, we'll talk about in a second, but you don't have this bridge, you end up like this guy by the name of Judas. And Judas walked with Jesus. Judas walked with the 11 other disciples for 3 years. He heard every sermon. He saw every miracle. Man, and he was right there in this community. In his community, the other 12 disciples, including Peter, James, and John, they are definitely connected to God, but he never got it. He never started this bridge. He never started a personal relationship with God where God talks and you listen and you talk back. So that was like Judas if that bridge is missing. Then we talked about, for some of us, we have a really strong community and we are really connected to God. These bridges are strong, but our community is not connected to God. And when your community doesn't share your faith, you begin to have challenges because you go to them for wisdom and they give you things that are so far away from the Bible that you go, oh man, is that really what I wanted to hear? But usually by the time you do that, you're struggling so much anyway that you'll buy into about anything that will destroy you. My wife was on stage last week, and she talked about this being a guy by the name of Job. You probably heard Job talked about as a guy who went through all this horrible stuff. But if you read the story, Job is really connected with God. They have dialogue at the beginning and the end, and he's really connected to his community. It says early on in the book that his friends came into town because they heard about what happened, and they just sat in silence with him for 3 days. Like his community is strong. However, this community struggled with their relationship with God, and they began to give Job some bad direction. Even his wife said, Job, you should just curse God and die. That's what she says. Right? And so again, we have 2/3 of the triangle. The last one is if you are connected to God, right here, and you have a community that's connected, but you're missing this bridge, it's gone. You become like Elijah. And Dave shared this last week. It was really great, man. You can jump on our website and listen to Dave talking about this. But he talked about the fact that Elijah had seen miraculous things happen. Like he literally called down fire from heaven. That's where that phrase comes from. He calls down fire from heaven to prove these other gods as false. And then part of the story that I hadn't noticed or really paid attention before, but God gave him some supernatural abilities in the way that he ran to outrun some things. And you go, man, for sure, Elijah was completely connected with God. This bridge was strong. And later on, later on in the story, we hear that God still had a ton of people that he was connected with. But Elijah didn't know any of them. And he goes to God and he says, God, I'm the only one left. God, they've killed all the prophets and I'm the last one. I'm the one remaining faithful prophet. I'm the only one here. And he adds to the end of this little rant to God, and they're trying to kill me now. And God says, here's what we're going to do. He says, I want you to go in town and meet with this one guy, and I want you to anoint him, and he's going to be priest over this area, and God is creating community. Then I want you to go to this over here, and I want you to anoint this guy, and God is creating community. And so God is telling him, like, I'm going to have you go do these things, and we're going to begin to create your community. And it was tough for Elijah. He had to go do something. He had to, get out of the cave and go make friends, right? Come on, introverts. We got to get out of the cave and go make some friends. And it's challenging, but God calls him to do this. And at the end of God's rant back, he says at the end, he says, and on top of all that, There are thousands of people who have yet to bow their knee to Baal. Thousands. So again, Elijah literally is surrounded by godly people. And he never made this bridge. He was connected to God, no problem. And all the other people around him were connected to God, no problem. He just didn't know that they were there. Sometimes I feel like you and I, we come to church, and we sit in these chairs and we worship, and it's great. We listen to the sermon and we say amen once in a while. But inside, we're lonely. We feel like we are alone, like nobody understands us. We're wrestling with deeper issues of addiction and marriage struggles. We don't know where to go, and we don't know what to do, and maybe we rant to God. God, does nobody see me? God, are you even there? We begin to question even if God is there. And I have this idea like God is looking down into Revive Church, and he sees this lonely person, and they're sitting right next to another lonely person. Behind them is another lonely person. And it just takes some community. It takes getting out of the cave and making a phone call and sitting across the table from someone. This summer, we have purposely organized our summer to have lots of events, of just social gatherings, of just food and having fun together and chatting. And that's not going to be deeper community. And when we go to the park and have a barbecue, that's not going to be deeper community. But understand, that's your on-ramp. That's your opportunity to meet some people, to sit at a table with people you don't know and get to know them and see if you can begin to find some community. All right. I'm trying to think what I want to do next. Let's do this next. Let's look at what happens on the rare occasion that these bridges are all strong. That you're investing time in your community and you're investing time in God, and God is connected into your community. There's a really great story I want to share with you. And I had read this. I just have never really studied it, so this is kind of new material for me. I'm excited to share it with you. This is the story of David and Jonathan. Now, if you're new to Christianity or you didn't grow up in the church, totally fine, stoked that you're here. David you've at least heard of. You've heard of David and Goliath. So the story of the really short version of David and Goliath is Dave, being the young brother, is just taking some sandwiches he didn't get up to slay Goliath. He got up to deliver some sandwiches. And by the end of the day, he had killed the giant, the Philistine that everybody was scared of. And so he takes these sandwiches in, and there's this standoff between the Philistines and the Israelites, and I don't have time to go into the whole story, but David goes in, slays Goliath. Pardon me if it gets a little gross, but this is biblical, and it's part of our story. He cuts off the head of Goliath, who was supposedly the tallest man to ever live, almost 9 feet tall, and he picks up his severed head, like the first ever Game of Thrones. He picks up the severed head, and he takes it to Saul. Saul is the current king, and he's on site for the battle. And he takes it, and he kneels down, and he presents the head of Goliath to King Saul. And it just so happens, in the room, at the same time, is this guy named Jonathan, who you may not have heard of. Jonathan is the son of King Saul, heir to the throne. That's an important part of the story. Heir to the throne. And when Jonathan meets David, he is, the Bible says, just really impressed. It says this is Samuel 18. So 1 Samuel 18. If you go to 1 Samuel 17, it's the story of David and Goliath. You can read it on your own and see all the stuff they left out on the flannel graph when you grew up in Sunday school. It's pretty great. And then in 18, After David finished talking with King Saul, Jonathan, the son, became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David, King Saul, decided to keep David with him and did not let him return home to his family. Basically, they were all so impressed with David that they said, "You need to be here with us." Verse 4, and I believe this didn't happen all like right after the killing, but this is giving you kind of a time lapse of this quick relationship that is forming between David and Jonathan. Verse 4, Jonathan took off his robe and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. This was symbolic of being completely candid, completely open, that this micro community now has an intimacy. It's man, I am your true friend. And so he even takes off his weapons and he hands them to David. And thus begins this incredible relationship with two men who are both connected to God and both have this strong micro community. Chapter 19. In the end of chapter 18, Saul, the king, becomes jealous. He becomes jealous because David is really great at what he does. And what he does is kill bad guys. He's really good at this. And there's one day when they're traveling home and people begin to shout, "Saul has killed thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands." And they're celebrating, and the king hears this. He becomes jealous of David, and they begin to have issues. David didn't have issues, but King Saul was jealous. So that takes us to 1 Samuel 19, verse 1. King Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David. But Jonathan had taken a great liking to David and so warned him, "My father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning. Go into hiding and stay there." He's warning his best friend. He's saying, "Man, my dad is going crazy." And I think there's something, again, this is extra biblical. This is me thinking out loud here, but I think there's something really great that you should note here, that Jonathan understood what was right and what was wrong. And that can get really complicated when your parent, especially your father, is involved. But he understood right from wrong because I believe this bridge was strong. And he understood what his dad was trying to do was sinful. And so he warns David, "Go into hiding and stay there." Verse 3, "I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I'll speak to him about you and will let you know what I find out." So Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, "Let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has not wronged you. And what has he done? And what he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his hands when he killed the Philistine, killed Goliath. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel, and you saw it, and you were glad." He's reminding him, remember what all these great things he has done. He is speaking highly of his friend. "Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason?" King Saul listened to Jonathan and took this oath, "As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death." So the first part of this that I want you to get, where this becomes important, where this little part of your triangle becomes important, is that Jonathan not only defends his friend, but he goes out of his way to say positive things. I've been through, I think we've all been through this. Let me make a scenario we've all been in. You go to a table, you sit down in a restaurant, you're meeting with a friend, maybe there's 4 or 5 of you, they're pretty good friends, and you sit across from somebody, and they begin to badmouth the third friend who's not at the table. Been there, right? We've all been there. Are you with me on this? And you're listening, and there's kind of this conflicting feelings you're getting inside. At least I get this. And you begin to think, why are you bad-mouthing this person? You don't say it out loud, right? Because that would be rude and inappropriate. So you're just listening. You're like, why are you bad-mouthing this person that I love? Well, why are you bad-mouthing this friend that we both love? Why would you do this? And as the conversation continues, by the end, you begin to question what they are saying about you. Like if you were the third guy that's not at the table, is he having this type of discussion with everybody? It's important for me when I'm trying to find my micro community that I find somebody that will defend me, fight for me, but beyond that they speak positively about me, that they say positive things about who I am to other people, and I do the same for them. Now, this becomes really challenging because your micro community knows everything about you. They know the bad stuff. They know the embarrassing things. They know the things that you hope never get out into public. They know these. And still we see here Jonathan fighting his father on behalf of his friend, and not only defending him, but saying positive things. King Saul, remember when he slayed the Philistines. Remember the joy that he has brought to our people. A great friend will stand up for you, even when you're not there. The second thing I see in this, pardon me, this micro relationship, this micro community, this is 1 Samuel 23, starting in verse 15. While David, again, we're jumping into these just little snippets because of time, but while David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And just like any of us, if somebody like Saul, with the resources Saul has, is out to kill you, it's probably going to happen. It'd be like the U.S. government trying to track you down. They're going to find you. It's going to happen. And so David would have been nervous and scared. And listen, and Saul's son, Jonathan, went to David at Horesh and helped him, I love this phrase, and helped him find strength in God. It doesn't say he went out and offered encouragement. He went out and gave him some great solutions. He didn't go out and say, here's a graph with 3 points. This will solve all your problems, right? He said, this is what he said. He said, the author says it, helped him find strength in God. Somebody worthy of your micro community will point you to God, will help you figure out what God wants. I made a comment a week or two back that anytime I share wisdom from the Bible with somebody, I never have to go back and apologize for it. When I share my own wisdom, sometimes I have to go back and say, man, I wasn't thinking, or man, I wasn't raised right, or whatever. I have a reason, but sometimes I have to apologize. But anytime I point to God, anytime we open Scripture and study together, I never have to apologize for that. And in this moment, Jonathan goes, he finds his friend who is scared, and he helps him find strength in God. And helping him find strength. This is tough. This is you coming to me because I'm having a bad day. This is me coming to you because you're dealing with addiction. It's us going to somebody whose marriage is about to fall apart and saying, I know things are bad. I want to help. And we live in a society, let me go on a tangent for 1 minute. We live in a society where we're all over-opinionated and undereducated. We all have an opinion on everything. So if anybody's got a problem, I got all your solutions. They're right up here. I got your life figured out for you. Let me tell you what it is. Right? So we're over-opinionated and undereducated. So there's times when people come to us, we go, oh, yeah, let me tell you what you... No. He goes and they seek God together. The word find really means to go looking for. So I can see this young man who is heir to the throne and is best friends with the guy who's going to get the throne, by the way. Kind of similar places in life, both great warriors, and they're praying together, and they're seeking God together. And it takes time and discussion and prayer, and it takes this great phrase I love, processing in the Spirit. It's sitting across from somebody in your micro community and just saying, can we seek God together? I have been blessed. One of my micro community guys I've been friends with for over 20 years, and some of my sweetest times of prayer were with my buddy. His name's Nick. Is with my buddy Nick. And literally on our faces in front of God, seeking direction and seeking wisdom. And big picture stuff. I was trying to figure out for me if it was time to leave ministry in this one area and move into this other area and whatever. And we prayed for hours on our face. And it was a sweet time. And I believe this is what he's alluding to, is he helps him find the strength in God. He doesn't give him the answers. They just spend time seeking. You want somebody in this community, in your micro community, man, it's somebody you can seek God and pray with. Let me give us one more really quick. This is 1 Samuel 23. We're going to start in verse 17, actually just right after this. Don't be afraid, Jonathan said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. There's so much happening in this micro community right here. Obviously, Jonathan is the prince. He's heir to the throne. He deserves it. Yet he's concerned more about his friend. And he knows there's some things that have happened that show that David is going to be king. And he says, listen, I know where you're going. I will support you. I won't be jealous of you because I want to be king. I will support you. I will be your right-hand man. I will be second in command. I will be there for whatever you need. This gets a little deep, but I hope I can explain this well. I know you can comprehend it. I'm just not sure I can explain it. It's important in your micro community that these individuals know where you're going, that they understand what you're trying to accomplish. Tam and I use the phrase, how can I put gas in your tank? In other words, what can I do to help you get further down the road where God is taking you? What can I do to give you a turbo boost of where God wants you to go? Because what I find what happens outside my micro community, people who don't know me very well, when I go to them with my problems, they don't want to put gas in my tank. They want to take my steering wheel and turn me in a different direction. Does that make sense? Are you with me? And we see right here in this micro community that he's not trying to manipulate. He's not saying, it'd be easy for you and me to go, it would be easy for you and I to say, you know what? You should just stay in hiding. I'll take the throne. It will be fine. Hey, once I get the throne, then you'll be set. You can be my number two. What we're doing is taking David's journey that God has called him to, and we're starting to steer it our direction, going, this is the way you should really go. When I talk to people about Revive, like I call their pastors and stuff, I was like, hey man, we're struggling with this or whatever, we're trying to figure this out, or this has been really good, and I could use some wisdom. They need to understand who we are and what God has called Revive to. Because the instant reaction is for all of us to grab the wheel and go, well, this is what works for our church. This is what works for my family. This is how I grew up. And we begin to grab the wheel and say, all your problems will be great if you just get on my road. God has called us all to different roads and different paths. And I love right here that he's saying, man, I'm on your team. I want to put gas in your tank. I want to help you become the king, and I will be number 2. I don't know if you have micro-community. I assume it's something that my great-grandfather had a ton of, and my grandfather had some of, and my dad had a few of, and I'm lucky to have 2 of, and my kids won't have any of, because our generation, it's just becoming less and less connected. And we've got all this social media, and it's just used to tear people down, and it's getting frustrated. And I've never become best friends with anybody that I met on Facebook. I need real interaction. I need to sit across from somebody and hear their heart, and for them to hear my heart, it takes time, a lot of time. It takes history before this micro-community happens. But I believe it's biblical. I believe God has called us to this. So let me close with just this question, this thought for you. If you were to be gut level honest, sincere, which of these bridges would you say is a struggle for you? And which one are you great at? We can celebrate that just as well. My heart would be maybe for you to have a real discussion with a good friend or a spouse or somebody this week and just talk about this triangle. And maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, how is your relationship with God? How is this bridge? Is it crumbling? Is it shiny and new every day? Are you so excited about this bridge to God? On a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? And then you can talk about your community. Is there somebody who knows you, who struggles alongside you, who celebrates with you when something great is happening? And then this one, which most of us haven't even probably thought about until this series, but my micro community, is it connected to God? Are they leading me in the right direction? Are they doing what's best? Are they encouraging me towards what God has in my life? Obviously, we kind of stopped mid-story. I invite you to read more about David and Jonathan. At the end, Jonathan dies first, and David writes this incredible song about his good friend. He even makes, it's not a joke, but he just says, my love or my relationship with Jonathan is better than the love of a woman. That's what he says. But they have this strong, amazing relationship until Jonathan dies in battle. So spend some time this week. Figure out what God is saying. Figure out which bridges are strong and which ones could use some work, and seek God in that.